Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar. Today we're going to be talking to you about website accessibility, what all airlines need to do. My name is Michaela Pereira, and I'm a principal consultant here at System Concepts. Today, me and my colleague Emanuela, we're going to tell you a little bit about the steps that airlines should take in order to make sure that you meet the US Department of Transportation, DOT, accessibility requirements, which will come into effect in December this year. So to make sure that the session runs smoothly, it would be great if you could make sure that your audio is on mute. I can see a couple of you joined now, so I'm just going to mute some of you as I wait. So basically, the session today is just going to be us telling you a couple of things about the steps that you need to take. So before we start, I'd like to tell you a little bit about System Concepts. So we're a specialist user experience consultancy based here in central London. And we help our clients resolve problems, design solutions, as well as boost performance by making sure that their target users are at the heart of the design and development process. We've been working in this field for over 30 years now, and we pride ourselves in building a long-lasting relationships with our clients. One of our clients that we've built a great relationship with is Amadeus. And because of this relationship, we have a really good understanding of the airline sector. So this, coupled with our experience of accessibility, means that we're really well placed to give you advice on how to meet the DOT requirements. At System Concepts, we're really passionate about all things UX, and we firmly believe that accessibility, just like usability, needs to be considered right at the start of a project. And it's something that you need to kind of consider and do ongoing work on. Emanuela, who's one of our specialist accessibility consultants here, has been working in the field for over 10 years now. And she has prepared a video that outlines the steps that we believe you should take. So we pre-recorded this segment just so that we could include subtitles within the video to make it more accessible. So the video that I'm going to play you now will run for about 15 minutes, and at the end of that, Manuela and I will come back and we'll answer any questions that you have. So as you watch the video, if you think of any questions or anything that you want to clarify with us, please send us a message using the chat window on WebEx. We really hope that you find the video useful, and we look forward to answering your questions.
I'm sure you all remember the Olympics that took place in London in 2012. I remember watching the Olympics and the Paralympics and feeling amazed and inspired by both sets of athletes. That got me thinking, is there a difference between the needs, wants, and goals of disabled versus non-disabled athletes? Both sets of athletes were working extremely hard to achieve the same goal, which was to win the gold medal. They all went through the same hard training, made the same sacrifices, and had the same natural talent. Similarly, I believe there is no real difference between website customers. All customers, regardless of their abilities or disabilities, have the same goals, which, in the case of an airline or tour website, may be to find a flight, buy a ticket, or check in online. They all have to go through the same process to achieve these goals, and they all want to be able to do so in the most efficient way possible. This means there is no real difference between making something accessible or usable to all. Accessibility is simply a very important component of usability, and making something accessible will also make it more usable. Now that we've established what accessibility is, let me tell you some key facts. Disability is common. Almost 1 in 5 people in the world has some kind of disability. This is a very large proportion. And on top of people who are recognized as having a disability, there are older people whose eyesight, hearing, or motor skills may have deteriorated. There are then people with temporary impairments, such as a broken arm, and they may also have issues consuming web content that is not accessible. Accessibility is ethical, and I think you will all agree with me on this. Accessibility is a legal obligation. In most countries, there are legislations around the accessibility of information and services available online. Also, all airlines that fly to, from, and within the States have to comply with the rules published by the US Department of Transportation in 2013. And I'm going to talk about these rules a bit more in detail in a minute. Accessibility makes financial sense. Around 10 million disabled people live in the UK, with a combined annual spending power in excess of £80 billion. The 54 million disabled people who live in America have a disposable spending power of $220 billion. So it is very easy to predict that making your websites accessible is going to generate a profit for your organization, because suddenly millions of disabled people will be able to use them to buy goods and services. Many have the impression that people with disabilities can access and use digital content, but this is very far from reality. The availability of information and services online has actually resulted in a much more accessible world for many disabled people. And there are a wide array of assistive technologies that can enable access to digital content. Some of them are physical devices, such as modified keyboards, modified mice, switch devices, and braille input and output devices. Others are software, like screen readers, used by blind people, screen magnifiers, used by people with low vision, and speech recognition software, used by people with mobility impairments. The most important thing for you to remember is that you can never guess how your customers are going to access your content. Each customer is different, has different needs, different preferences, and may use one or a combination of assistive technologies. But remember, the days when disabled people avoided digital content are over. There are many reasons why you should ensure that all users can access your websites. As I mentioned before, there are ethical and financial reasons, among others. But if you work for an airline company right now, you're probably interested in accessibility because you're aware of the new rules published by the US Department of Transportation, or DOT for short. So let's see what exactly the new requirements are. The DOT requires airlines and airports operating within the US to make their websites and automated airport kiosks accessible to passengers with disabilities. This requirement extends to all websites selling flights to, from, and within the United States, and requires that all core services and information is compliant with level AA of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0 by the 12th of December 2015. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are recognized internationally as the standards in digital accessibility, and they contain a series of success criteria that a website has to meet to be considered accessible. Some of these success criteria relate to the design of pages, others to the source code, and others to the actual content. So by the end of this year, any page of your website providing core services, such as booking a flight, checking in, or amending a booking, must satisfy 38 of these success criteria. I'm not going to pretend that this is an easy task to achieve, but it's not impossible. If you plan ahead and take the right steps, you can achieve great results in a relatively short amount of time. So I'm now going to talk about 5 key steps that you should take to achieve this important goal. First, you need to put in place a long-term strategy. Accessibility doesn't simply happen overnight. You need to carefully plan for it. The content of the strategy will be different for each company, but things that you may want to include are how accessibility can be integrated into each product life cycle. Who is responsible for the accessibility of your services? What tools you should and should not use when developing new content? And how to monitor the accessibility of your websites. So the first thing you need to do is to put together a strategy that is effective and sustainable. Then you want to check the level of accessibility knowledge and skills of your staff. Very often, inaccessible content is the result of a lack of knowledge and experience in accessibility, rather than a conscious decision to ignore accessibility. It is very important that all people involved in the production of online content are trained in accessibility. A common mistake is to believe that the whole responsibility for the creation of accessible websites sits with the development team. Well, that's not true. Many of the success criteria, including the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, relate to design, to content writing, to multimedia production. So you need to identify the specific training needs of each team and organize suitable training sessions. We often go to clients to deliver different training courses. For example, we teach developers how to code websites so that they can be accessed with assistive technologies, or how to use YARIA to make content easier to use for blind people. We show designers how to select color combinations that they can use, and we teach them how they can visually convey information in a way that is perceivable by all users. We explain to QA testers how they can test content for accessibility, and so on. So it's important you provide each person involved in the production of online content with the specific training that they need. The third step is to establish the current level of accessibility of your online content. This is useful not only to identify any issues and areas of improvements, but also to understand what caused the existing problems. For example, if most of the issues are the result of an inaccessible code that was written by your development team, then you know you need to train your developers and make sure that they are aware of the importance of accessibility. If many of the issues relate to the way the pages have been designed, you need to train your designers. In other cases, the inaccessible content may come from libraries or frameworks that developers used, or they may have been created by a third-party agency. In that case, you need to review the tools and suppliers that you use to establish whether they can produce accessible content or whether you should use different ones. The next step is to plan how to monitor the accessibility of your websites in the long term. After you invest resources to make your content accessible, you can't simply forget about accessibility. Accessibility is very easy to break. It only takes one person to load an image with no alternative text to make your site non-compliant with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. For this reason, you need to have in place an effective monitoring process, consisting of regular format audits as well as internal quick testing. You should recruit an external agency with strong expertise in accessibility to conduct some regular format audits. But also, every time new content is created, especially if it is complex or highly interactive, your development and QA team should perform some quick testing, ideally using assistive technologies. So there must be someone in the development and QA teams who has been trained in using screen readers and other testing tools. Finally, do not forget to test your website with real end users. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines are very good, but they mainly address technical accessibility issues. To make sure that your content not only is technically accessible, but it's also practically accessible and usable, you really need to put users in front of it. We recommend that you conduct a round of user testing every time you make major changes to an existing website, or at each stage of development of a new website. We often run user testing involving people with disabilities, and along with our clients, we always find these sessions really fascinating. And we have an internal database that we use to recruit participants with a wide range of disabilities, so that we can really test every aspect of our clients' websites. So please remember that no guidelines can replace real end users. I hope that you found these 5 steps useful and that they will really help you make accessibility happen in your organization. We know that these steps work because we had the pleasure and privilege of working with many clients to help them achieve accessible solutions. One of our clients who has fully taken on our advice and expertise in terms of accessibility is Amadeus. I'm sure that those of you working in the travel industry will be familiar with Amadeus. But for anybody else, Amadeus is a company that provides IT solutions to hundreds of airlines and travel companies around the world. We've been working with Amadeus since 2008, helping them test and improve the usability and accessibility of their products. We've received permission from Amadeus to tell you a little bit about the work that we've done with them to make their online booking application, which is called eRetail and is used by over 70 airline companies, accessible and compliant to the US Department of Transportation rules. In 2012, Amadeus came to us to see how we could help them assess and improve the accessibility of eRetail. We suggested a list of activities that we've been conducting since, and they really had a great impact. We first audited eRetail against the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines to identify any existing issues. We conducted the audit on desktop, tablet, and mobile devices, as users are likely to access this application on all sorts of different devices. We then followed the audit with a round of user testing. We recruited participants with a wide range of disabilities, and we facilitated testing sessions that lasted up to 2 hours each. The feedback from the participants was extremely valuable, and during the sessions we discovered many issues that a technical audit alone could not uncover, such as poor layout, unclear icons, and so on. After testing the level of accessibility of eRetail, we wanted to provide Amadeus with the necessary tools and skills to fix the problems that we identified. We did this through 2 stages. First, we wrote some customized accessibility guidelines. We combined the Web Content Accessibility Guideline requirements with the findings from the user testing, and we came up with a new set of guidelines that were specific to an airline website. For example, these guidelines include guidance on how to build a progress indicator for a multi-step booking process, how to use icons, how to allow users with a disability to request special services at the airport. Secondly, we run training sessions in Europe and Asia to teach developers, designers, and QA staff about these guidelines. This provided Amadeus with the necessary skills and knowledge to improve the accessibility of eRetail, and they've done an amazing job since. In fact, 3 years later, the research and development team from Amadeus built a new user interface architecture using HTML5, YARIA, and other technologies to ensure that components are fully keyboard accessible and are fully understandable and usable by all users, including people who are blind. We're providing ongoing support to this team as they develop and build eRetail, and we're in the process of carrying out new audits and user testing for them in the near future. We're very proud of the work that Amadeus has done, and I think that the eRetail case study shows how accessibility can really happen when the right steps are taken and the necessary resources are invested. Alongside Amadeus, we will soon publish a white paper based on the guidelines that we wrote for eRetail, and we hope that this can provide guidance to all designers and developers involved in customizing airline websites, whether they work for the airline IT department or for a third-party web agency. So this was all we wanted to share with you in this webinar today. I hope you found it interesting and useful. And now we're going to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, we hope you really found that video from Emmanuel really interesting. We already have 2 questions that were sent to us through the private chat window, which we'll answer now. But in the meantime, if you do have any other questions that you'd like to ask us, please do send it over to us. So the first question, Emanuela, I think you'll want to take this. So the first question is, there we go. So the first question is, I know that there are some automated tools to test accessibility. Do you use any of those? So if you could tell us a little bit about your opinion on the automated tools and our use of it, would be great.
Yeah, this is a question we are asked many times when we run our training courses and by our clients. Automated testing tools can be useful, especially if you are not that experienced in accessibility. That can be very helpful at a very early stage of testing, but unfortunately you cannot rely on any automated testing tool. There are lots of automated testing tools, but even the most expensive and complex ones cannot test more than 30% of the success criteria that you need to test your content against. And this is because pretty much most of the requirements need to be tested manually by a human person. Even something as simple as alternative text, for example, an automated tool can tell you if the code includes the alt attribute, but an automated tool cannot check whether the alternative description provided using the alt attribute actually makes sense and it's accurate. So when we conduct our audits, we don't use any automated tool, and we do not recommend any specific automated tool. If you want to use some, just to help you start maybe on an audit, there are some out there that are free, and you can have a look and play with them. But yeah, unfortunately, they cannot do. They can't replace any human being.
I think that answers it perfectly. And I suppose the other thing to note is sometimes when you do use automated tools, you actually end up spending more time trying to understand what these tools are kind of trying to say to you as well. I think we have another question actually. So have some companies already been sued over web accessibility is another question that has come our way.
Yeah, definitely. Quite a lot of companies have been sued over the past years because their website was not accessible. Probably in many cases, the companies that are sued react quite quickly and try to fix the problem. So that's probably the best case scenario. But unfortunately, there have been in the past cases where the company received some complaints by blind users or users with other type of disabilities. They have not reacted, they've not tried to fix the problems, so yeah, they ended up in court. I think one of them, the case that everybody remembers, is the one from 2000 when the Sydney Olympics game website wasn't accessible. So Bruce Maguire, who was a blind user, could not use his website, and that was probably one of the worst trial that everybody remembers. But since then, there have been plenty of other cases. Some of them actually are related to airline companies. For example, here in the UK, RNIB has sued BMI Baby, which is a low-cost UK company, because their website was not accessible. And that was quite a recent case. I think it was from 2012, so quite recently. And the same, there have been similar cases in the States. For example, Southwest Airlines did not provide an accessible website, so they were sued. And there also been a case that involved actually the kiosk at the airport, which is something that is also covered by the DOT. So it's something that airlines needs to worry about as well. So definitely there have been cases where companies have been sued, and if companies don't worry about accessibility, at some stage some users will complain and may take them to court. So it's important to consider accessibility.
For sure. And I guess another point just to kind of mention is there's, even if you're not taken to court, your reputation damage obviously counts towards something as well. So one of my colleagues actually shared a link with us yesterday where they talked about how Netflix put out a new TV series called Daredevil, which is about a blind superhero, and they didn't put subtitles in there, or sorry, not subtitles, audio descriptions on there. There was a lot of backlash from the community, so there's a lot of reputation damage that might come along, as well as obviously the kind of legal side. We've got another couple of questions. So Thomas wants to know if he can download the video from somewhere. Yes, is the answer. So we've got most of your email addresses, so our colleagues will send on the link to you guys soon. And there's another question. So can you name some websites that are already compliant with the WCAG standard?
Unfortunately, the answer to this question is no. Not because there are no websites that are compliant, but because there is no official certification that a website is compliant. And the reason why no one, not even the W3C, can give this kind of certification is that a website may well be compliant today, right now, but in 5 minutes someone may add an image with alternative text, and all of a sudden the website is not compliant anymore. So there is no official list or any kind of official recognition for websites that are compliant. So yeah, the answer to the question is no.
Great.
But hopefully there are lots of websites that are compliant.
Yes.
That's the hope.
Okay, I think that pretty much answers the questions that you have sent our way. If you do have any further questions or you want to discuss anything further with Emanuela or myself, feel free to get in touch. I'm just gonna put up a slide that has our contact details on that. So you should be able to see our details on that, along with the system concepts details as well. So we really hope you found this webinar interesting and useful. And yes, so we'll be in touch soon with the link to the webinar.
And good luck!
All right, thank you.
Thank you, bye.